Good evening, Chicagoland, and welcome to another live CAN TV 21 talk show with Violence Interrupters not-for-profit organization. I'm your host, Mr. Tio Hardiman, and I'm glad to be here again. You know, we have a lot to talk about today, and with me today I have my good friend and one of my colleagues and associates, Mr. Eric Russell, and I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you very much, my dear brother. It was an absolute pleasure.
Appreciate you. So Eric Russell is the president of the Tree of Life Justice League of Illinois, and I just want to show the overhead here so people can see the Tree of Life Justice League of Illinois. And this young man has been doing a whole lot of work with myself on the front line, doing our best to try to stop violence in Chicago. We've been standing up against police brutality, standing up against some of these politicians out here that are not doing a good job. So we're doing the best we can to educate the people on the highest level possible.
Yes, sir.
So for everybody watching tonight, feel free to call in at area code 312-738-1060. You can call in and talk with us. And the topic for today, and before I get into what the Justice League is all about, I just want to read off some numbers because Violence Interrupters is all about reducing violence and providing people with information, relevant, up-to-date information in regards to what's happening in Chicago. So, Brother Eric, for the year 2016 so far, here are some of the deadliest communities in Chicago. Okay. The Austin community, which is on the far west side of Chicago, 24 homicides already, 117 wounded, shot in other words. Inglewood, 20 homicides, 107 people shot. Garfield Park, 12 homicides, 96 shot. And the list goes on and on, like North Lawndale, Humboldt Park, Roseland, Grand Crossing, Auburn Gresham, New City, Chicago Lawn, South Shore, Little Village, Chatham, West Pullman, and Westtown. These are what you call some of the top 10 communities where you have a lot of homicides.
Yes.
So what I would like to do, for you to do, you can maybe tell the callers and everybody that's watching tonight, what is the Tree of Life Justice League all about of Illinois?
My name is Eric Russell. I'm the executive director of the Tree of Life Justice League of Illinois. And primarily, our mission is to provide, we're social justice police accountability advocates. Our primary purpose is to assist at-risk children, minorities, and the working poor, and just speak out for justice for those who have been victimized by the system.
Okay, good. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to show a few people some of the information in regards to your mission, okay?
Yes.
Then we get back into what we're all about and how we work together. So this is an overhead. And before we take the caller, just listen for a minute. So this is an overhead that I'm showing about your mission, the vision, to break the cycle of violence through various workshops and supportive services, teaching conflict resolution. We believe that high-risk youth and minorities can pick from the Tree of Life, having an unobstructed view of their vicious cycle of gun violence. So
absolutely.
The reason I had you come on, because, me being the president of Violence Interrupters Not-for-Profit, we kind of fit like hand in glove.
Absolutely.
As it relates to trying to deal with this epidemic of violence. So let's take the first call and see what they're talking about.
Good evening. How you doing, man?
Okay.
Hello, brother.
I was having a discussion with somebody else in terms of what we can do right now, and it may be another call that we're going to call later on talking about bringing in the National Guard. I was the person years ago talking about bringing in the National Guard. We don't need the National Guard. There's some common sense type things that we can do. Like, for example, now I'm not talking about stop and frisk. What wrong with stop and question? All these shootings that's happening around the city of Chicago, it happens to be a lot of times somebody's on probation, somebody's on parole. If they got somebody out there that's already on probation or parole, guess what? They can't be searched. If you know you're on probation, you're on parole, you're not going to be out there on the street most likely with the handguns. And maybe it's not too bad of an idea sometimes to start thinking about a curfew. These are some things that we could do right now, but we need some long-term solutions as well.
Yeah, thanks for your call, caller. And you want to respond to that before I make my comment?
Well, as a police accountability advocate, I like the ideal of just engaging. And that's what we do at the Tree of Life, is that we demand respectful engagement from the police. And by respectful engagement is that we don't care a whole lot about tasers and body cams. The Chicago police need to have respect for our humanity. In order for you to talk to someone, first of all, you have to respect them. And the problem is that the Chicago police don't have a reverence for the sanctity of our lives. So we cannot just simply count on them to engage us respectively just through a conversation.
Okay, good. So what I would like to say, Carl, is that I agree with you in regards to we definitely do not need the National Guard right now. But
Oh,
at the same
absolutely
time,
not.
if the people in the community do not get their acts together, the National Guard may be called to come in. And I have to say that because I'm one of the guys, I'm pretty much against calling in the National Guard, but at the same time, right now the police cannot stop the killings in Chicago.
They can't.
And then we need a lot of community involvement. We need about 1,000 men and women to really step up and organize on a high level to go out there and do some aggressive outreach with the young brothers that are out there shooting one another. And we need family members. I say this all the time. So if we cannot get to that level, and it's going to take resources. See, a lot of people talk, but we all need resources where we can reach more people. Okay, so the reality is this here, Brother Eric, in my opinion anyway. If we do not get our acts together, they would end up calling in the National Guard, which would not be good for a lot of these. So you got to understand, it's only a small percentage of the young men out there that are really involved in a violent lifestyle in Chicago.
It is.
But that small percentage, they get most of the news coverage because of the killing. So that would make people want to bring in a National Guard. I'm not for it, but at the same time, we have a lot of issues we need to resolve in our community. What do you think about that?
I think you're absolutely right, Tio, is that the police cannot stop the violence in Chicago because they don't have a relationship with the streets. They have no access to the shooters. What we find is that with different gang leadership and cliques, in order the police primarily, their main concern is to deal with criminal activity. The one thing that I like about what Violence Interrupters is doing is that they're intervening on the front end before the violence actually starts. And the police will never commit to that. And the police never commit to intervening on the front end. They will never be able to curb the violence in Chicago.
Yeah, and especially because this particular show or the comments we're making, this is not a criticism of the police. It's just pure facts. The police cannot appear or seem to get it right when it comes down to reducing killings and shootings, reducing shootings and killings in our community. Now, we had our issues, and I want to bring this up that we can segue right into it. Because you one of the brothers, you've been on the front line with myself and many others. Brother William Calloway, I mention his name a lot because he was a young man that exposed the Laquan McDonald execution, okay? He exposed that situation. So why don't you talk a little bit about how you've been standing up against police injustice and police brutality here in Chicago?
Well, right now I serve as the spokesman for the Betty Jones family. If your viewers are not familiar with Betty Jones is the 55-year-old mother of 5 and grandmother of 9 who was executed by the Chicago police for simply opening her front door, along with LaQuinton LeGrier. And we're so outraged because really Betty Jones, out of reverence to Rosa Parks, Betty Jones is really the Rosa Parks of this generation. If there's anyone that's not outraged by Betty Jones' execution, and all I can simply say is that therefore the grace of God, Betty Jones could have been your mother or my mother.
Okay, and for everybody watching, feel free to call in 312-738-1060 to talk with myself or Brother Eric. Another thing, I just want to go back to some of these numbers again, as I like presenting numbers. Coming up on June 13th, that's Monday. At 1 o'clock, we have a peace summit, a community peace summit in the Austin community, which Austin is #1 for the highest levels of shootings and homicides right now.
Let's call it K-Town so people know what we're talking about.
Right, that's right. We're talking about, well, we out on the streets all the time, but it's the Austin community.
Yes, sir.
And it's on the far west side of Chicago, and it's at Banner Academy School over there, right off Chicago Avenue in Leamington. Another thing, we just completed a workshop at the Carter G. Woodson Library on Sunday. The title was The Only Way to Stop Killings in Chicago. So we got overwhelming support from the community, and I want to thank everybody for showing up. But we have to continue to beat the pavement and do everything in our power. So talk a little bit, Brother Eric, about your mission as it relates to your organization, your overall mission.
My primary mission is just to be an advocate and a voice for those who don't have voices. We have such a battle. Our battle is on every front, Brother Tio. We battle institutional racism. We battle redlining. When I first started my activism work, I started as a mortgage broker, and I was on the ground floor fighting the civil suits against Bank of America and Wells Fargo. Because what had happened is that these lending institutions refused to lend money to black people. And what happened when the subprime market crashed, it took 45% of the wealth out of the black community.
Wow.
And this was absolutely devastating. And so what we'd like to do is that our primary mission is to reach the young children. What we have going on coming up now is that we specialize in what you do, and it's called conflict resolution.
Okay.
We want to teach our children how to resolve conflict non-violently.
Good.
Also, we're teaching financial literacy. Matter of fact, we're going to take a group of kids down to the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, and we're gifting them share in Nike. To let these kids know is that they don't have to kill each other over the new Jordans. They can actually own a piece of the company.
So therefore, economics is very important, financial management. So you pretty much raising the bar.
Absolutely.
With your organization. Good work.
Nothing stops a bullet like a job.
My man, I love it.
There's a clear connection, Brother Hardiman, between violence and poverty.
Well, I must say this. I'm going to say this. I witnessed you at one of the Chicago Police Board meetings when they were talking about some of what they plan to do in Chicago anyway. And you actually got on your knees in a dramatic fashion at the Chicago Police Board meeting. Let me know what was going on in your mind at that time and what message was you trying to convey by letting them know, look, people are out here hurting. And you was becoming a voice for the voiceless people here in Chicago.
Well, I was just I was not looking for any dramatic effect. Several other daughters of Betty Jones was in there. But I wanted Superintendent Johnson to know, since he said he hadn't seen any misconduct in his 27 years. But I first let him know that I bow before no man but my God.
Yes,
but the reason that I was on my knees, because it was on bended knee in a pool full of blood that Betty Jones's daughter, as she lay on her knees, clutching her mother as she took her last breath. She cried out to the police officer, "Why did you do this to my mother?" as she was on her knees.
Wow.
And the police officer's response was, "Your mother's dead. Get over it."
Woo. Well, that's kind of tough for me right now to even hear that. So,
and
my
then
prayers,
further, to illustrate being on the knees, is that I watched Betty Jones' children in a blood-splattered apartment. The mayor called me. He said it was a mistake, but he didn't think enough about the children of Betty Jones to send someone over to clean up the crime scene.
Wow.
I watched Betty Jones' children take turns scrubbing up their mother's blood in a house filled with ammonia and bleach, only to be resaturated by their tears. Well, and so I wanted to illustrate that he left these young ladies helpless on their knees. And I wanted to acquaint them with the horror that's being caused by the Chicago police.
Well, I must admit, because I stopped by the Betty Jones house as well.
You were there for the very first day.
Very first day, and I noticed all the blood in the hallway. So my heart goes out to her children. Plus, I met a few of her daughters. So, my heart, I pray for them almost every other day. And not every day. I just want to be for real about it. Now, quickly, I want to just add this, because this brings us to another part of the discussion here. So a lot of people sometimes criticize community activists and people out here on the front line, but to our credit, not just one person, to our collective credit, Superintendent McCarthy's been fired.
Yes.
The head of IPRA resigned. 2 city attorneys stepped down because all of these people were involved in this code of silence here in Chicago and really throughout the state. So to our credit, so we still have a lot of more work to do.
No, to your credit, I remember 2 years ago, you demanded McCarthy's resignation. You were one of the few voices that actually demanded that.
Oh, without a doubt, because I noticed something in his spirit that was not right at all, especially for Chicago or anywhere in the United States.
Had we had heed your call,
the Quan McDonald could have been avoided. Okay?
Exactly.
So what I want to say for people watching, feel free to call in 312-738-1060. And you can also visit my website at my name, tiohardiman.com, and reach out to me because we're doing a lot of good work here in Chicago. Now, one other thing I want to cover with you, brother, is that no matter what people are out here doing, there's a perception or an appearance that nothing is really working to stop the killings. I'm talking about overall. So you can stop some of the killings. Like, for example, my staff have mediated a lot of conflicts on the front end. Matter of fact, I'll put a number to it, about 40 conflicts that we stopped on the front end so far since the beginning of 2016. But we don't have enough staff to just take over the whole entire city as of yet, but we're working on it now. But what more do you think can be done on the ground level to maybe and perhaps stop some of these young men from killing each other over senseless violence?
Well, one of the programs that we have initiated at Tree of Life Justice League of Illinois, and it is Be Your Brother's Keeper, Not His Executioner. And what we would hope to gain by that, but besides teaching non-conflict resolution,
right.
we plan to implement your plan. Your plan, your workshop was absolutely phenomenal. It was actually a formulated plan to engage our people on the front end. And I really encourage, if your plan was implemented citywide,
Oh, yeah.
where you had the opportunity to train counselors how to intervene, train people how to have relationships with the shooters,
Right.
to create a sort of community awareness. But also, there's another aspect to this, and there's a medical aspect to this.
Okay.
Because, for lack of a better word, is that, if I may use the vernacular of the street, this senseless violence is crazy.
Oh, yeah.
And
Without
there's
doubt.
a psychological component to it.
Okay.
And I think that there are some people in our community that actually need, we just spoke with Dr. Naved, Kenneth Naved, and some doctors from Meharry Medical School. And they're going to come in and do some workshops and offer their medical expertise to talk about epigenetics and about the trauma of the slave mind and how urban trials and tribulations play a role in contributing to a lot of this violence. But the implementation
Yes,
of
ma'am.
your plan
Cool.
will go a long way towards reducing violence.
My brother, I
and
need
we
that.
plan to embrace that
Cool.
with our organization.
Yeah, for everybody watching, I just want to say this as well. I'm kind of glad you went on that medical forefront for a minute.
Yeah.
I studied the neuroscience of violent behavior, the neuroscience of restorative justice, so to speak, in violent behavior. Do you know that some people are born with a smaller, it's a gland in the brain, it's like an empathy gland, where you don't have empathy like some other people have. When that gland is so small, this you can back this up. You can look it up. It's on TED Max. It's called The Neuroscience of Restorative Justice, where this scientist went in there and he studied that particular gland and he compared that to other people's glands, where they have a bigger gland, where those people have a little more empathy, but those who do not have a bigger gland, and it's like I forget the exact name of the gland, but it's a gland in your brain. If it's small, you don't have the same empathy for your brother man like most common people would have.
And you have less, yes, that's a big part of epigenetics, because what it says that that lack of compassion and the trauma can actually be traced back heretically.
No, that's the point I make. So when you talk about the medical part of it and addressing violence as a public health, epidemic, that's very important. But you got to understand, you got violence occurring all across the United States. It's not just Chicago. You got Baltimore, New Orleans, Memphis, Tennessee. The list goes on and on. So we have a lot of problems. So back to the forefront here in Chicago and what we have coming up. And I just want to show a little bit more about your organization. Let me see this one here, the Tree of Life. So for people that are watching, feel free to check in with the Tree of Life Justice League of Illinois. It's a not-for-profit, and they're doing everything they can to help empower young people here in Chicagoland. And once again, if you're watching, call in 312-738-1060. So here we go again, Brother Eric, with another conversation I'd like to kind of delve off into. As it relates to a lot of the progress that's been made with this issue of police brutality and excessive force, do you commend the current leadership in Chicago for any of the changes they've tried to push forth? For example, we got a new police accountability task force.
Yeah.
We have a new set of people running IPRA right now. And right before we get to you answer the question, we're going to take a call in 1 second. And just 1 second before we take the call. So you got new people in charge of IPRA.
Yes.
A lot of police videos were released recently, and a lot of files were released. So before you answer that, just hang on, and we'll take this caller. Caller?
I want to mention about the City College of Chicago did a study where it showed over a 10-year period where blacks and browns was locked out of the trades in Chicago, particularly the construction trade. And we talking about over $1 billion in salaries that they was like locked out. And it showed how racism plays a part in it. I think we are feeling the effect of that right now, because black and brown, they were denied a way of that income coming in their community. I'd like to hear your opinion about that.
Okay. Quickly, I would like to just say there's proven information or data, whatever you want to call it, where a lot of African American people have been locked out of a different the trades, the construction industry. We've been fighting try to get our equal share of contracts, but once again, you only get a few people in the inner circle that benefit off the construction industry here in Chicago and throughout the state. And that's the fault of a lot of people that claim to be standing up for our people, but they go in there and get a piece of the pie for themselves in their inner circle, and they leave everybody else out.
Absolutely.
So what do you think about that, bro?
Not only the call is absolutely correct. There is no economic empowerment, and that can be laid directly at the hands not only of the so-called leaders, but absolutely it's a formulated plan by the mayor and a lot of politicians to disenfranchise African Americans.
Okay, cool.
We have a tale of two cities in Chicago, the haves versus the have-nots. And so you're absolutely right, caller, and something needs to be done about it, or we're going to become second-class citizens.
Good. So now before we had taken that call, I talked to you about the progress, the perception of progress is being made in Chicago with the police department. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, there is still blood on the mayor's hands.
Okay.
We will never be able to deny the fact, with the release of the Laquan McDonald video, that the mayor was duplicitous in the cover-up of Laquan McDonald's.
Wow.
When it comes to the IPRA, IPRA was just a rubber stamp board by the mayor, which was purely based on public relations.
Okay.
Then to add insult to injury, when it came for the search for the new superintendent, he did not even dignify the recommendation of the board, but instead he conducts business like some sort of wayward gangster, just unhinged.
Yeah.
And he appointed his own superintendent. And with the release of these videos is that these videos are just little more than public relations.
Okay.
You know, it's politics, Brother Tio.
My brother, I appreciate you saying that. That's the same way I kind of take a look at it. As a matter of fact, I compared the mayor to Dutch Schultz. I compared, well, he's a gangster out of Harlem, New York.
The Florist.
And right. And I consider Ron trying to be the political gangster here in Chicago, but he's not really that. You know, I think he's just a guy that ended up getting some. It's a lot of his own making, but at the same time, he has people around him that's giving him misguided advice on what to do, especially in the African American community. Mm-hmm. Some people do not like it when we talk like this, but it's okay because you have to speak the truth. Everything that I spoke up about, Brother Eric, turned out to be true.
Absolutely.
So therefore, I don't have no type of regrets for speaking the truth, and we're going to just keep marching on. So as we wind down a little bit, we got about 2 minutes and a half remaining, so I want to get all the information out possible. For those who are watching, you can check me out on my website, tiohardiman.com. You can check out Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, you name it. We're out there in the universe, and pretty soon you'll see me on a lot of other television stations. But I can't mention the stations here today, but I want to thank CAN TV for allowing us to have this show here. So, Brother Eric, I want to make sure you get a few more words in before we wrap up tonight.
What I'd just like to say, I can be reached at Tree of Life Justice League of Illinois. On social media, and our website is under construction. And the one thing that I would like to say is that when it comes to police accountability is that the Chicago police, those of us who have been kissed by the sun, seem to have a target on our back. The Chicago police do not get to be judge, jury, and executioner when it comes to our children.
Now, I love that comment, my brother, because I totally agree with you. And as a matter of fact, I told you, I really applaud you for that analogy. You said people that have been kissed by the sun.
Absolutely.
And that was deep. And I leave it up to the imagination of the people. And we know what it means. Don't worry about that. But the bottom line here, on behalf of Violence Interrupters, I want to thank everybody in Chicagoland for working with our organization, and the crowds are coming out. The crowds are getting bigger and bigger. Yes. We have a lot of plans for the upcoming year here to do our best to help change mindsets and behaviors associated with violent behavior, because we as a people have to start loving one another. Yes. So we got this thing where we don't really feel like brothers and sisters. For some reason, there's a blockage there. It's a blockage in the drain, and we got to put some people type humanitarian Drano down in there, right?
Absolutely.
To make sure that we all begin to embrace one another, like I said, as brothers and sisters. Somewhere along the way, we've lost that. That's why I love your concept, the Tree of Life Justice League of Illinois, because it all starts from the Tree of Life.
Yes,
And
that's
see if
where
we
the
can
knowledge of
understand
self.
the knowledge of self. So
Yes.
a lot of people talk about it, but we're actually backing up everything that we talk about. And I want to thank Brother Eric for coming on the show. And I plan to have you on the show again
I would love
because
to.
it's so much more to talk about and a
Yes,
lot
it
of work
is.
to be done in a short period of time. Okay. So until next time, thanks to everybody for joining us tonight.